I don't want to see what happened to City Attorney Pete Holmes happen here. Without getting into party politics.
Sure,
Let's
right.
just stick with. I want to see a progressive in that seat.
That's Seattle City Council member Lisa Herbold talking to me a few months ago about who she'd like to see replace her in District 1 after she made the decision not to run again. Who's going to end up in that position? And hey, with the way the numbers are looking now after the primary, did all those incumbents who decided not to run for re-election make a mistake? Points to ponder as we launch another edition of Seattle News, Views, and Brews, your coffee break political podcast. I'm Brian Callanan. I'm a host on Seattle Channel, and the views expressed here are my own. And joining me this week is a very special co-host. It's Hannah Krieg, who is the city reporter for The Stranger. Hannah, how are you doing? I'll ask that question first. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
And I'm asking a second question on top of that because I really need to ask, is following candidates door to door your favorite thing to do or your very most favorite thing to do of all time? Tell me.
Very most favorite thing to do of all time. I love to sweat. I love to stand awkwardly at the door while they talk to voters about the same thing 50 times.
I love it. I love it. Hannah Krieg, tongue in cheek, never in check. Always good to be with you. Thank you for the time here. Thank you also to our show patrons. Please join at the $5 a month level so we can send you one of these awesome decals. They look great on a water bottle, a laptop, a forehead, you name it. Very awesome here. If you want to listen, well, you got to support us too. Seattle News, Views, and Brews on Patreon. Please support the show. Thanks also to Converge Media. Converge airs the video version of the show Wednesday nights at 7. All right, here we go with right here, right now. All right, so Hannah, we are recording the show as some of the early returns are coming in, and I guess I'll just go around the horn and start in District 1. Looks like climate activist Marin Costa and attorney Rob Saka are poised to advance, but neither gained a majority in a very crowded field of 8 candidates. What do you make of this race to replace Lisa Herbold? Who are these candidates?
Yeah, it looks like environment. Yeah, as you said, Marin Costa is leading the pack over tech lawyer Rob Saka. It would seem he might do a little better in the primary considering he had a ton of money pour in from business, real estate, the infamous Trump donors of the town.
Yeah.
But he's also splitting sort of that business lane with a couple candidates. Preston Anderson got like 9% on election night, and then Phil Tavel had a really good showing. I think like 20% on election night.
Right.
So.
Yeah, 21%. He's been a constant candidate. I was surprised by that too. But yeah, I'm trying to figure out where we go from here. It's always tough when one candidate doesn't really stand out from the pack.
Yeah, so he might pick up all of those votes in the general. So maybe Costa's early lead in the primary doesn't indicate that she can't try for the.
Right. I know those later results always tend towards the more progressive voter out there, but I think about this too with District 1, and I just thought this was an interesting thing, Hannah. I live in District 1, and I just thought it was interesting to watch the redistricting happen. And now this is a district that doesn't just contain West Seattle as it did before, but it also has that little stitch of Pioneer Square in there too. Does that change the dynamic at all? Do those businesses maybe along Pioneer Square have a bigger voice in this whole thing, or how do you look at that piece of it?
Yeah, I think the redistricting justice group, I don't remember their exact name, kind of did the math, and no council districts super changed except for 6 with the Magnolia change. But
yeah,
West Seattle probably more importantly picked up Georgetown, which is a pretty working class neighborhood in comparison to the rest of the district. So that might be important. More so in the past, I think.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to see on that one. I think it's interesting to add those different pieces of District 1, and I say that mainly because I live here, but it's also interesting to see how that changes things up. All right, let's move on to District 2 here. Incumbent Tammy Morales got 49% of the vote on election night. Chinatown ID activist Tanya Wu got close to 45%, and this was the race with the fewest candidates, just 3. Margaret Elizabeth picked up just over 5% of the vote. She is officially out of the running. Hannah, were you surprised the incumbent here, Morales, did as well as she did?
I'm surprised she didn't do better. She's an incumbent with a ton of name recognition. I understand that Tanya has really deep community connections to the CID, and she lives in Rainier Beach, I believe, and
Hmm.
is that where she lives? And then Beacon Hill. She's connected to a lot of neighborhoods, so I guess I underestimated her. She has that Seattle Times endorsement, which is important, and there's not a ton of vote splitting in that district. So yeah, it's super close and really close to comfort for an incumbent. But I guess she'll pick up more progressive votes as the week goes on here
Yeah.
on Thursday we're at.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I that's an interesting observation there. I think there was a lot of thought that all the incumbents are gonna get pushed out, and that didn't necessarily happen in the primary, but I think you're right. I think there is definitely when you see a showing like this from Tanya Wu, I guess what I'm seeing is what's gonna be a very, very interesting fight here and a pretty close race potentially between these 2.
yeah, agreed. Wild to see an incumbent not get that name recognition push off the gate. So
Yeah,
we'll see.
yeah, especially in a field of 3 candidates, so
Mhm.
interesting to see where that one goes. Alright, I'll move on to District 3 with you as we keep on running along here with the city council and the who's next basically for the Seattle City Council as we move on to the election results here. In District 3, this race to replace the council's longest-serving member currently, that's Shama Sawant. Another crowded field here, 8 candidates, and cannabis business owner Joy Hollingsworth and we're also is one of the candidates there. Then you have Transportation Choices Director Alex Hudson emerging as the top 2 on election night. This is such an interesting race here, Hannah. I just wanted your thoughts on these 2 candidates and what's next.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be a really close one once we get to the general. Alex Hudson could even overcome Joy just based on further ballot drops.
Yeah,
But you know, like Joy is the mayor's pick, and she is
right.
the business lane candidate. It's undisputable, and
Yeah.
she might pick up Bobby Goodwin's 10%. He did pretty
Mm,
good, but
right,
Alex Hudson will probably pick up all those little progressive. They all like 6 of those candidates got like
right.
5 votes each, and so it'll be really close in the
Yeah,
general, but
yeah.
it's way more doable than I thought for Hudson. I really thought Joy was gonna just absolutely destroy in the primary, and that doesn't seem to be the case.
Right, and I think it's interesting too, you mentioned, Joy Hollingsworth having the backing of the mayor. How much weight does that carry in a race like this one? And I think about that because we're looking at 7 seats that are open here, all these district seats, and then potentially, another voice that's gonna be open there if Teresa Mosqueda ends up winning at the county council level and leaves the city council, but how important is it to have that backing of the mayor? What do you think that means in a race like this one?
I mean, people love the mayor. He's like
Used to be
people
pretty popular, sure, yeah, more popular than the council, that's for sure.
right, a certain group of people,
Right,
maybe not,
right, right.
but, um I mean, I think it means something to voters who might already turn out, though. The people who vote for Bruce Harrell are the people who vote in every election, because like more homeowners,
Mhm.
older people. But it's also important because it kind of indicates that the same donors who rallied around Harrell, the same donors who are pouring money into Saka's race and Rivera's race, will probably give money to Joy, and that's huge, and that's election winning money.
Yeah, that's a very good observation. And I just wanna ask you, just in terms of what's next for District 3 here, I mean, we're talking about an end of an era with Shama Sawant not deciding to run again. How do you look at the impact of her time on the council and how that impacts the council going forward? Is it kind of this cut in time and we put Shama Sawant over here and we kinda move on past that? I think she was such a lightning rod of controversy certainly
Mhm.
on the council, but got a lot of stuff done too in terms of how she helped workers with $15 an hour, etcetera. Talk to me about that, a post Shama Sawant world for District 3.
Yeah, I mean, The Stranger's written about this pretty extensively about
Mhm.
the left and the city council after Sawant. I think that um, certain conservative groups and media outlets or talking heads will continue to compare everyone to Shama Sawant for
Sure,
years to
right.
come.
Yeah,
Will
it's gonna
never
be yeah.
escape.
Yeah, I can't wait for the ding dong, the witch is dead, headlines coming out here, but yeah, keep going.
Progressives will never escape the Shama Sawant allegations.
Yeah,
But I think I don't. I mean, we're gonna lose like a really cool sort of movement politics in City Hall. Maybe other groups will carry on that banner, but it will be hard not having a seat at the council to sort of be pushing the
Mhm.
conversation left, even if maybe some people come at her for like not getting policy passed, which is not true. But
Sure.
she always pushed the conversation to the left, always um, expanded the imagination of what
Yeah.
this could do,
Mhm.
uh, for better or for worse, I guess. But
Yeah, yeah, right, right. No, and certainly pulled the council in a few different directions. And I brought up the $15 an hour. There's also all the different rent measures that she was able to put through there. I know rent control did not succeed in its most recent incarnation, but I was thinking back on this, Hannah. I remember a few years ago, Tammy Morales was very much aligned, it seemed like, with Shama Sawant over the past, at least in the early parts of her term on the council. And I just noticed over the past few years, a very subtle in some ways, but a distancing from Shama Sawant for Tammy Morales. Did you notice that too? Have you seen that?
maybe slightly. They still vote in alignment like
Yeah.
all the time.
Okay.
They have like slightly different styles, I guess,
Mm,
and um, maybe a little more. Yeah, I mean, like I think they have similar votes at least. But yeah,
yeah.
I see what you're saying, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. It's such an interesting factor here when you talk about what Shama Sawant did for the council over the last 10 years here, and I'm interested to see where we go from here. This is a very a big inflection point, I think, for the city council. I'm interested to see what these elections will bring. So I need to take a little bit of a break here because I'm just about out of breath. But we are going to keep on going around the horn here, folks. We're going to consider what's happening in District 4, the replacement for Alex Peterson, who decided not to run again. But looking at what some of these incumbents are doing, why not? Maybe he should have. The rest of the council races coming up on Now Hear This. Okay, so normally this is where I put a pithy soundbite into the show and we get to discuss it, but we have too much ground to cover here, Hannah, when it comes to the council. And I want to talk about District 4 here with you. Alex Peterson not running again. The two people poised to replace him are tech consultant Ron Davis and Maritza Rivera, the deputy director of Seattle's Office of Arts and Culture. What's the scoop on these two?
Well, it seems that Ron Davis had a pretty good showing on election night.
Hmm.
He could he could really dominate, or maybe all those Kenneth Wilson votes will go straight to Maritza.
Yeah.
It's really interesting in general that Ron did so well considering how different he is from Alex Peterson based on
Yeah,
like
can you talk about that? Just there's an urban planning background that I know that Ron has that I think is distinctive, and let's talk about that.
yeah, Ron Davis is like a huge urbanist. He wants so much density, so much transit, which is something that Alex Peterson was kind of known, at least density, to really fight
He
against.
struggled with it. Yep. Hmm.
He struggled with it internally
Hmm.
and externally. Um,
Right.
he, I shouldn't be so surprised considering that um, Democratic Socialist candidate Sean Scott in 2019 actually did pretty well
Yeah.
too.
Hmm.
There's a split in that district, or there's room for both like
Yeah.
sides to
Right.
be
Hmm.
successful there. So we'll
Hmm.
see if Ron Davis can rise to the challenge and overcome Maritza. And she already has big PAC money behind her. Um, so we'll see what.
Support of the mayor, you said as well with Rivera.
Well, she's supported by all the same donors. I don't know if the mayor's like officially endorsed her or
I
anything.
see. I see. Okay. I guess in looking at that, were you surprised that Alex Peterson didn't run again? It seemed like he had a voice on the council. Say what you will about it, but he had a certain voice on the council that was trying to play in more of a moderate to right sort of a lane there. Were you surprised Alex Peterson didn't run again?
I mean, I think it was shocking just because I like hadn't thought about it, but
Yeah.
I just heard he hated his job, which I would hate, especially if I wasn't like passing much at all.
Mm.
It seemed like he was in a super powerful position, but you know, the council might get more conservative this time around, so maybe he should have stuck around and he would have had more friends.
Yeah, right. That's an interesting, yeah, observation. I kind of thought that too in terms of where the pendulum is going to swing with the council, but still definitely a lot ahead. And this one is really interesting up in District 5, Hannah, wide open as can be. 10 candidates running, the most of any district, this to replace Council President Deborah Juarez, who is not running again. So we've got former King County Superior Court Judge Kathy Moore emerging as the lead candidate and fighting for that second position, Christiana Obey Sumner, a social equity consultant, and community activist Nilu Jenks. Some thoughts about D5 and what's going on here.
D5's wild. Ah, that was the one that I was really excited to watch for election night. So much could change by the time people are hearing this, just because a couple hundred votes right now separate Nilu and Christiana in D5 for that second spot. I know that Nilu had to sort of work really hard because she wasn't endorsed by the Seattle Times or by The Stranger. And we can see by every election result from the primary that, yeah, it kind of seems to be a pattern that
Mm.
the two people on top are the two people who got those big paper endorsements. But you really came the closest to overcoming that. We'll see if the progressive swings, like the later votes, were people
hmm
who are Nilu people or Christiana people. But I mean, either way, it seems like they both did really well, and it could indicate that that vote split could come together in the general for whoever makes it through. If
hmm
Christiana makes it through, I would hope that Jenks's voters would rally around them. It seems like
hmm
there's a little bit of tension there, unfortunately, but
Mm. Okay. Always. Right.
that's the only way they can beat Kathy Moore if the progressives want to beat her, is to all hands on deck, Christiana's team and Nilu's team coming together.
I wanted to ask a question about D5, I guess in similar ways that I asked about District 3 here. What is the legacy of Deborah Juarez? I think she was a leader there for 2 terms, ended up beating Ann Davison, of all people, for that second term there going through. But what legacy does she leave behind in terms of leading D5, which is a very much a changing district, a lot of growth going on up there, a lot of people moving to that area. It's one of the more uh, I guess, affordable places in the city right now in terms of a place to live. Talk to me about Deborah Juarez, her impact on D5, and where do you see that district going forward?
I mean, Juarez is one of the more conservative members on the
hmm
council, but speaking to the candidates who are running right now, it seems like a lot of them appreciate how she was able to establish an identity for D5 while we
Mm.
sort of played with this districted system.
Yeah, right. Still
Because
relatively new. That's a good point.
so she was able to really do that. She advocated a lot for light rails up there, seemed to be pretty connected with the issues there. I'm not sure if
Mm.
everyone in D5 would like how she handled
Sure.
things. I know
Right.
that we asked the candidates in D5 if Juarez had run again, would you have challenged her? And everyone said no, except for um, Ty Reed and
Mm.
a mutual aid organizer, Ty Reed, and then the social equity consultant, Obey Sumner, who's in second
Yeah.
right now. So
Yeah.
it seems like there was a lot of approval for Juarez, or at least you want to say that you like
Sure.
Juarez, piss anyone
Right.
off.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah, it seems like people kind of liked her.
Yeah. No, I know, and and it's important to say the kind of because another thing that's been going on in D5, and I guess all around the area is dealing with homelessness. And there's a tiny house village I know going into D5 coming up here in a couple of months. And I wanted to talk about that because I was just trying to get your vibe on this. Is that top issue that candidates are talking about now? I know it's been homelessness for a good amount of time. I know public safety gets thrown in there too. In terms of that top issue that candidates are talking about, what are you hearing? What is that?
Top issue is definitely the cops. Public safety
Yeah.
um, seems to be what divides Seattle. Do you want the 1,400 cops that there's no way we could physically hire because of the national shortage, or do
Yeah.
you want like to put police money to other forms of public safety?
Yep.
Um, seems to be the division. Also, as you said, homelessness. Uh, how much money she would be giving to the King County Regional Homeless Authority,
Sure.
come under scrutiny from all sides, and just recently lost their what was it, CEO? Is that their
Yeah,
title?
right. Mark Dones ended up stepping down. Right. Hmm.
So there's a lot of turmoil over there, and I know that's a big issue. The issue I care about is progressive revenue because of the projected 25
Yep.
$2 million shortfall in 2025, and that's really divided the candidates on if you'll even say the word taxes um,
Yeah.
out loud.
Hey, can we put a pin in that one? Because I did want to follow up with you on that one, Hannah. That was a good article you put together on the Progressive Revenue Task Force and what they're working on. Let me put a pin in that for a second because I want to talk about District 6 and what's going on here. This one may have surprised me the most. Incumbent Dan Strauss, not in a totally comfortable position, but he did get over 50% of the vote on election night in a 6-candidate race. Looks like he and Pete Hanning, who is the director of the Fremont Chamber of Commerce, who came in with 30% of the vote, are going to be the final two here. What do you make of what Strauss pulled off here? And I say that with a question mark because I was surprised. He stuck his neck out on things like the tree protection ordinance and things of that nature. And here he comes in with 50% of the vote. What do you think?
I think he definitely didn't stick his neck out on a lot of really progressive
Mm,
issues,
okay. Fair.
drug stuff, renters' rights. So I would think that he really tried to play to that more conservative business lane, maybe sort of relying on his incumbency to just overshadow Pete. I know in our endorsement meetings, they agreed on basically everything, held hands at one point in the meeting,
Oh
just
boy. Okay.
mirror images of each other. And then that mailer, infamous mailer of Dan Strauss crossing his arms
Yes.
and saying defund was a mistake, although there was no defund, I think could have appealed to a lot of people who might have voted for Pete instead. So it seems like they're really fighting for that lane. So, I mean, yeah, 50%, great job, great
Yeah.
job.
Right. Right. Love how you said that. That's interesting. Always good to get your feedback on that. I didn't know about the holding hands. That's inside the studios there with Hannah. I appreciate that. Well, let's wrap it up with District 7 here. This is the incumbent that I think is probably in the most trouble here. Andrew Lewis was the lead vote getter in the primary, sitting at about 42% in early returns. Looks like he'll be up against Bob Kettle, a retired Navy commander, with about 32% of the vote. And so again, I guess we're going down this conventional wisdom line of add up the people who didn't vote for Lewis among the 6 who ran, and the incumbent is going to lose this race. Is that how you see this shaping up? Talk to me about D7.
I mean, one of the dynamics I would think about is the fact that Lewis just so recently came into like conflict with his buddies in big business with
Mm,
Downtown Seattle Association on that vote he took on the public drug use and possession
yep,
ordinance. So he really hasn't had as much time to rebuild that connection if that's who he's relying on to push him over the edge to Bob. But it's also, you know, he won his last election with $800,000 from labor. So
right.
I don't know if he's done enough to impress them or if they'll just rally around him because he's not Bob Kettle.
Yeah, right,
But
right.
we'll
It's
see.
yeah, we will see on that one. It's interesting to think about. I mean, Andrew Lewis, a younger candidate for sure, took on an older guy and an established guy in terms of public safety with Jim Pugil, the former chief of Seattle Police in his last election, and won it out in 2019. So I'm interested to see how this goes through because I think Andrew Lewis is a tougher candidate than some people might realize. And also, when it comes to that public drug use and drug possession, this is something that's cooking in the council right now here in August. And we're going to see some sort of legislation, I think, very soon on this that I think will answer some of Andrew Lewis's concerns. And maybe he can try to put that behind him as a consensus building movement rather than he was in opposition. Do you see that happening? This new vote on public, the mayor's package on public drug use and possession potentially being a benefit for Lewis long term.
I mean, he's definitely tried to, you know, rehab his image with business through this public drug use thing. I think if he
Hmm.
really is behind what the mayor's saying, that could definitely help rebuild those connections he had if that's what he wants to help him through the general. But I mean, I don't know if the progressives and labor are going to be happy with
Mm.
this mayor's bill. So, I mean, it might be finally time for him to pick a side.
Yeah. If she may be so bold. I love it. I love it. That's going to be a really interesting race to watch go down to the wire here. So, all right, we've got a little bit more coming up here. A final take with Hannah on what's happening with progressive revenue with the city council. A very interesting story here. You're going to hear it next on What's Next. And I just wanted to wrap up with something that really does impact the future of the Seattle City Council, and that's this whole idea of progressive tax revenue. There's a task force that's working on this. I know their champion in Teresa Mosqueda might very soon be leaving the council and working for the county council, but talk to me about what's going on here, because I think this is something that could potentially shape a lot of council discussions going into the future.
Yeah, so in October, the council decided we need more progressive revenue. They set up this task force with the mayor to really look into different um, proposals, what's legal, what we should pursue to fill that projected $200 million shortfall. They invited big business to the table. They thought that's going to be great, but it doesn't seem like it is, that the Chamber of Commerce CEO, I never know people's title, but the CEO, I think, Rachel Smith, was trying to
Yes.
really derail that process, or change the focus to where we could make cuts instead of looking for more money, like what social programs aren't um,
Mm,
worth taxpayers' money.
right.
And that happened, and there were delays at the same
Hmm.
time.
Hmm.
Um, for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And then, so after those delays, we're finally going to get that report next week. It's unclear how they came, like if everyone on the task force has signed on to those recommendations, how many there will be, if there will be any good. I'm sure by the time this podcast airs, I'll have 4 more stories on this task force.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's gonna
Hmm.
be a huge deal. I mean, people have been waiting for this task force. Candidates have been waiting for this task force to like guide how much they'll say about progressive revenue, especially the business candidates who want to wait till the chamber
Right.
signals
Hmm.
where their priorities are, because they want to pause jumpstart. It seems like they're
Right.
very diverse. Um, so this report is going to dictate a lot of that election discourse for sure.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's so interesting to talk about Jumpstart. You remember where this thing started. It was back in 2011 with a conversation with former council member Mike O'Brien, and it was a head tax to begin with and all this other kind of thing. And then it turned into something that has brought in a lot of revenue for the city of Seattle. And I guess, to be honest about it, really was a big boost for the city of Seattle during a very tough economic time during COVID. And I think you're right. I think this conversation has to keep going on for the city council. It was something that Jumpstart, at least, was something that the mayor at first did not support. Now, guess what? Those dollars that are coming in, he wants to put them into the budget. I just think it's a really important conversation to have.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Most important conversation in the city.
Okay. All right. Most important, I'm not sure about that. I think I may have, though, the most important question that I've been wanting to ask all podcast to you, Hannah. How was the Taylor Swift show?
Oh, it's so good. It was actually the
Come
second
on.
time I got to see it, because I am very lucky. But it was great. It was, 3.5 hours of your childhood flashing before your eyes, and
Right.
it's really exciting to get to go and cover my first concert for The Stranger. I got to dip into music reviewing, which is cool.
Wow. Wait, was there an interview involved? Did I miss that?
I didn't get to talk to Miss Swift, no,
I
but
see.
I got to go to the concert, write about the experience, talk to fans, so it was fun.
Yeah, no, it looked like everyone was rocking at that one. I mean, it was a bigger amount of applause than the Beastquake when Marshawn Lynch rolled through the field there. So that was a pretty cool show. I was not cool enough to go. I appreciate your insight on it. I went to the weekend last year at Lumen Field, and I'm kind of still coming down from that. So I appreciate the insight insight as always from you, Hannah. This is Hannah Krieg. She is a city reporter for The Stranger. Hannah, thanks once again for being here on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
And thanks everybody listening to Seattle News, Views, and Brews, where you can always find out what's brewing in local politics. The podcast is on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you like to listen. Please also find Seattle News, Views, and Brews on Patreon. Show your support. Thanks for watching on Converge Media as well. See you next time. Seattle News, Views, and Brews is an independent production of Callanan Media Services. Copyright 2023.